Boom, we're recording. And we'll get started. So, good morning, y'all. I'm Travis King, the head of community development for Remote Year, and the host of these knowledge drops that we do bi-weekly now. And this is Dan. I'll let him introduce himself in a minute, but just to go over sort of the rules and the timetable of how this all works. So we got our webinar recording now. Thank you guys for joining. And we'll let Dan do his deck for about 10 or 15 minutes explaining what the topic today is, which is going from full-time to freelance work. If you guys have questions during his talk, feel free to open up the question and answer box, which you guys can hopefully find at the bottom of your little webinar room, and ask, write questions in there throughout his deck. And then at the end, we'll get to all the question and answers, plus some of the questions that people put into the hashtag knowledge drop Slack channel earlier this week, that maybe people who couldn't make the call or couldn't make the webinar, but will watch the recording later. So we'll get their questions answered as well. And then, yeah, the last 10, 15 minutes too, we'll just take questions and let Dan kind of, you can give you guys more information for whatever you guys want to learn. But without further ado, Dan, take it away, man.
Okay. I actually can't see. Share screen. Okay, let me share this deck and then we can get started.
Beautiful.
Okay, and present. Okay, great. Can everybody see this?
I sure can.
Okay, cool. So welcome everybody to the Knowledge Drop. My name is Dan Gold and I'm with Darian. So as Travis mentioned, this talk is about my journey from going freelance, from working full-time for my whole career. So get started. The major takeaways, there's three. So first, how setting goals for yourself helps you stay focused. That's pretty important. Next, being creative and looking for jobs and opportunities. And lastly, finding a balance between work life and personal life. So why I'm dropping this to you. So I switched from a full-time job to being full-time freelance, and I actually got much busier. All of my jobs were not found on traditional job posting sites. So things like, Remote OK or, all those other job posting sites, I haven't really found any of my current freelance clients there. And lastly, I help contribute content to a number of publications in two different fields. So I specialize in photography and web development, and those are, how I kind of form my business. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm originally from outside of Philadelphia. I've had 6 cell phones since I was, I think, 18. I moved 9 times from when I was 19 years old and when Remote Year started. So if you include Remote Year, it's been, I don't know, 20 plus. I've lived with a cat that has asthma and I overused the poodle emoji. Some professional work history. So I worked at my university's website. I worked at a small creative design agency called King Design. And then I worked at a nonprofit in New York City called Charity Water. And now I work for myself. And all these bullet points were actually 3 years apart. So that's kind of every 3 years I kind of go into a different transition. And this is the first year into that freelance transition. Okay, but what do I do for real? So I build out the front end for a healthcare app. I work on internal tools for Spotify. I sell images to Shopify. I contribute to Unsplash, and I also host photo walks for Unsplash. I am a brand ambassador to a outdoor backpack and apparel company. I write travel photography articles for KEH, and I am working on volunteer projects. So I do a lot of little things that kind of make up bigger things, and I'll get to more of how that looks soon. Okay, so in January of 2017, so I spent a lot of time kind of making my decision whether, if I was going to stay full-time or going to switch freelance. And in around September, kind of in the fall, I got 2 opportunities to work on some awesome projects. And I was able to kind of balance them with, my full-time work. But, because of that, I worked for 12 hours, likely more, almost every day for 2 months. I think I would wake up at 8 and I would finish working at 10, sometimes midnight, sometimes 2. It was a pretty intensive 2 months. So yeah, I had 3 active freelance clients. 2 were, ongoing projects, and 1 was sort of a la carte hour type of work. And in January is when I realized that I had enough stability in my freelance setup that I could leave my full-time job. And this is the best part. So how did I actually do this? So where's the beef? So for me, it worked out really well because I had a solid base for personal and professional connections. So, more specifically, over all those different, career jumps that I made after 3 years, the reason I left was always on good terms. And it was mostly because for professional growth. Like, I was at the top of where I could kind of limit myself and I wanted something else. So because I had kind of established that, expectation and a high quality of work, anybody that I had worked with in the past, had, that work ethic in mind and was, if they had a project in mind, they would talk to me and I would kind of give them advice. And when the time came, I would accept a project that I was interested in. Fake it till you make it. So this is something that is, I guess, pretty cliche, but I kind of believe it. And what this means is, experts in a field, like, so you could think that if you see somebody that you really value professionally and you see the quality of work that they do and you really like think that they're awesome, like they're also in this sort of the same position where they might not be 100% sure if what they're doing is right. They might have questions. They might be looking up to somebody. So being super confident about what you are doing and how you're selling yourself is really important. And I think that confidence is what is like the best advice someone could have told me when I was making the leap. Get lucky. So I told you before that my 2 clients were made from connections before. So one was a past coworker and the other project that I got was through a friend at the gym. So I happen to have 2 projects kind of fall into my plate. And those are the 2 clients that I actively work with right now. But since then, I've had tons and tons and tons of other people, find me and ask for work, and I either accept and do it if it's a quick job or kind of pass it off. So it really depends for everybody's situation. And look for new opportunities everywhere you can. So I mentioned that I hadn't really found my jobs on traditional job posting sites. But that's not to say that you can't look at those sites, look at the company, track down the company, look to see, who's at that company, and then contact them one-on-one. And, if they have other opportunities, if they have other projects that they're working on, like kind of making connections is one example. Another example is, from your, personal connections that you have that, if you have a friend that works at a company and you really like that company, maybe try to get an intro, really trying to be creative and figuring out the best places where you find yourself being a best fit is usually a good advice. So some keys to success. So a lot of these kind of tie into each other. So get out there, be on social media, and prove your skills. Let your work speak for itself. So a lot of this is really continuing to make great content. And if you have that great content, eventually it'll get shared, it'll get discovered, somebody will find it valuable. And if people find it valuable, that's the best thing that can happen because, first of all, you're sharing something with somebody based on your past experience, which is great. And also if they find it valuable, they'll share it and it'll kind of spread and snowball from there, which is great. Be mindful of the content that you put out. Make sure what you publish is quality work. So, if you want to make content, you want to make great content, sometimes it could feel a little rushed. Usually you see something that somebody put out and sometimes it's not always the clearest on how much time they spent on it. So, you could make something and push it out, and if it doesn't have a lot of thought, it might not be as valuable. But yeah, being really mindful about that types of content and making sure it's really great is really smart. And then be patient. So a lot of these things takes a lot of time. So, for example, my Instagram, I post every single day. It's kind of like a personal goal, and I wait. And, a couple of times I've gotten some really great opportunities from some of the posts I made. But if I posted once per week or kind of forgot about it for a month, the amount of content, the amount of eyes, the amount of impressions is a lot lower. But if you're waiting and you're being patient and you're, waiting for that perfect opportunity, then that's when something can really happen.
With your schedule of like posting, where do you find the balance with like putting out only good work, but also trying to post once a day? Like what if you just don't have something that you think is up to your standards?
Right. So I actually have a Instagram backlog of posts that I flagged from previous shoots, previous months. And, if like something doesn't feel as relevant, so I don't always post in the city that I'm in. I kind of post on like a theme of like a color or like a feeling. So like if it's rainy, I might post like 3 or 4 rainy photos. If it's like really blue and summery, I might post like, 3 or 4 blue photos. So I'll kind of like pick from the queue that I've established.
Smart.
Okay. So also I wanted to mention that with kind of like the transition between full-time and freelance, like a thing that wasn't really mentioned here was do a lot of stuff. So, like I'm involved in so many different things, which is not something that I would have normally done if I was, working on, working for a full-time or working for a company full-time. So since I have the flexibility, I can take a day off, explore a new technology, take a day off, go to a small town and photograph it. Like the amount of options you have once you made that leap to freelance, something might not happen right away, but it gives you the flexibility to explore and really grow, personally and professionally at the same time. Okay, don't. So some common ways that you can get derailed. So this actually happens to me a lot, and it's something I'm actively working on, but losing focus and context switching. So, since for me personally, I work on a ton of different things at the same time, like I'm constantly getting interrupted and switching between this project, switching from this thing, switching from that thing. So kind of having like a chunk of time or an hour or 30 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, to, have that time carved out is super important. I found recently that to-do lists work really great, and you can sort of pick out what you want to do from the day and move forward, and then make sure that at the end of the day you've hit those short-term goals.
Do you use any of those like time management sort of like tools or apps or anything like that, or you just kind of one day?
Yeah. So with time tracking, I actually found that to be more distracting because I'm constantly like checking how much time I'm spending on something, and it's like sometimes I actually want that distraction. Sometimes I want that procrastination type of mindset to have my mind wander on something else. But with that said, like I try to keep really focused, and since I'm kind of like indecisive in that regard, the time tracking piece gets a little bit too much and too, I don't know, it doesn't feel right, and I've tried it, and it hasn't really worked for me, just on like a personal feeling of I don't necessarily want to track every single minute of my day. But what I have found is that to-do lists and schedules really work out. So if there's something that I really want and really don't want to forget, I'll throw a reminder on Google Calendar. And if there's something that like I really want to do, I might actually like a couple weeks in advance, put something on my calendar so I can remember it and get reminded of it a few weeks from now, instead of having to always think about it. And also like with emails, I'll use Boomerang to kind of like clear out my inbox, and then have something come in as a reminder so that I can do it later. Just because like at any given day there might be like 15 things going on at once, and I want to really focus on the one. So all those things I think kind of help with that. Working against your goals. So kind of defining what you want to do is great, and then if anything you're doing is working against that goal, it goes against what you've kind of set up for yourself, and obviously a quick way to get derailed. Overthinking things is also a huge issue that I think overcome in this transition between being freelance and full-time, or from going freelance from full-time. So, all the little details. So you can get wrapped up and go into a huge rabbit hole of like, setting up your infrastructure of the business. Are you going to incorporate? Are you going to continue as a sole proprietor? Are you going to do all these things? And the best thing is really try something. And, obviously if you make a mistake, you'll learn from that mistake. But if you get wrapped up in thinking about too much of what is holding you back, then that's going to actually hold you back from moving forward, and nothing's going to get accomplished, which kind of leads into this. So letting the last 20% of anything drive you crazy. So, the first 80% is typically good enough for your MVP, and that last 20% might take a long time. So I've seen this at almost every job that I've worked at, and also, even the projects that I work on myself, where you might spend a day, an hour, a couple of days, something short on a project and get most of the way there. And then the rest of the time is spent, perfecting, in web development, it's like copy changes and design changes, and some of that stuff can get super granular and really hold you back from launching your product or your goal or your article or whatever you're working on. So like I said, the first 80%, and once you kind of gotten everything, gotten the message across, it's probably good enough. And that last 20% will take the longest amount of time. I don't want to say that you shouldn't have that drive to make it perfect, because I'm totally the same way. But maybe that last 20% can be spent when you have some downtime, if you have a slow day, something like that.
Do you think like editing a photo is like a great micro example of that? Because that's like, I have friends that are like photographers, and I can see them like make a photo look beautiful, and then they'll keep working on it for like another hour, and it kind of still looks the same to me, or like, but to them they're like perfectionists.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a great example. So like for me, I actually created some Lightroom presets, and those are kind of based on common edits that I do for most of the photos. And most of the time I'll go through and I'll flag all the photos, and then I'll hit that preset. And if it looks good, sweet, move on. And then if it looks a little bad, I'll tweak it a little bit and then move on. And then sometimes when I have more free time, I'll go back, and if the photo is a little dark, I'll tweak the exposure. If it needs a little bit more contrast, I'll bump that up. Like, so yeah, I think that's a perfect example. And also, like writing, you could, scrub through your article you've written or that you wrote, and catch every single grammar mistake. Move your sentence structure around. Scrap this paragraph, scrap that paragraph. But if you limit yourself to writing a blog post in 1 hour, and after that 1 hour, you have a blog post, like cool, you have a blog post. But you could spend like 2 days perfecting that article, and you've gotten there. You've gotten to that first 80% in that first hour. So I think this is like really important for a lot of different aspects of everything you're doing, especially with setting up freelance stuff for the first time. Okay, so here's some homework, and I think that this stuff would have been really helpful, when I first started. So write down where you don't want to be in a year. So I think, if you've kind of made the decision that you want to kind of transition into more of a freelance role, I think a good exercise would be to decide where you don't want to see yourself. So that would be something like, I haven't made the plunge yet, or, I don't know, something. So I think it's important to identify this, so that in that year period, you can kind of keep yourself in check to make sure you're not working towards where you didn't want to be. And then the second thing I think is really great, which is figure out what makes you happy. So, if you're doing this for the wrong reason, I think here's where you can sort of identify that. So, for me, like web development and photography, both of those passions make me super happy. And why I think this works out for me is because I can work on this in my free time and not feel bad about it. So, if I have off, it's not really off, because I'm either working on my personal site, I'm working on a personal project, I'm working on something that I thought was cool, I'm going out and taking pictures, I'm emailing people, making friends, doing anything. And it's really great. And it's kind of hard to have that balance of that work-life balance, because, it's hard to draw the line on what's work, what's like a hobby, so kind of having that what makes you happy and using that as a benchmark is kind of a great start. And then make stuff. So, shout out to Eddie's Never Stop Creating talk, which is great. And, with him, like he makes stuff all the time. And with a ton of people that I follow on Instagram and follow on Twitter, like they're creating some really great content. And also, everybody else is watching your content. So you can kind of get some great feedback, but you won't get that feedback and you won't get that dialogue until you've made your first thing. So, if that's a photo, if that's an article, if that's, a business plan, if that's a marketing plan, if that's some sort of advertisement materials, like whatever. I think making stuff is super important, and you're able to get feedback on it. And then some questions to ask yourself. So how would you endorse yourself? So think about what you could offer to other people, and looking kind of, from the top down to you, like what would you say about yourself and how can that be useful to what you're doing? And then lastly, would you give yourself money, and would you hire yourself? So, like, do you see yourself valuable in your specific field? And do you see a market for yourself in that area? And, do you think that you're confident enough to give yourself money if you were hiring yourself? I think it's a great exercise. And that's it. So after this, we'll open up to questions, but I wanted to make myself available for contact. So you can Slack me, of course. You can find that emoji or tag me in @gold. My email is me@danielcgold.com. Instagram, Daniel C. Gold. And also I co-run a Instagram account with my girlfriend called Halfassed Travel, and then some links to Instagram, Twitter, and my website. If you click on this last link for the even more links, you'll see all the other social media sites and a couple other important things where you can check me out.
We have a bunch of questions, like more than one per minute. But I want to start with the first one just because I recently started following your Halfassed Travel, and it's awesome. And I think you mentioned to me, like when we talked like a week ago, I wrote something like on Slack of like, ask Dan how we got like 16,000 followers on Instagram, and then when we checked, you were like, it's over 20 now. So like, how did you get like such a momentum and like snowball sort of thing going with that account? Because it's like it's blowing up.
Yeah, I think it was patience. So, and also great content. So, we had the idea in October and we posted one photo, and I think at that time we had like 0 followers. So, it's like you hashtag it, and then you follow some of your friends, they follow back, and then anybody can do this. You get to like 300 followers and you get like 50 likes in every photo. So I knew our content was pretty strong, and I had a feeling that like other people would really like it too. And all of our friends that saw it really liked it, but from there it doesn't really grow that much. So I sent it to one blog, actually 3, but one picked it up, and I think it got like, I don't remember, I think 1,000 shares, 5,000 shares, something like that. And it kind of got us over that hurdle to 1,000 followers, something like that. And then so many eyes got on it, and then it kind of took off from there. So I think from then on, we got kind of picked up by a couple different international, like chat apps or other articles. And then it kind of grew to 5,000. But then like once you're kind of over that hump, like for our experience was publications started reaching out to us to feature us. But then at the same time, like it's also carefully planning, what you want to say, how you want to represent yourself, and then kind of taking cues from other accounts that have been doing something similar. But like this has been done with no bots. We're pretty proactive on the account, so we like and respond to comments, and we respond to messages, and it's like actually a lot of work, but it's rewarding. And if you have the good content and someone picks up on it and you're patient, something can happen.
So we have like a very related question from Becca. She's asking, do you have any sort of logic or strategy with hashtags? And do you think that like the hashtags in general are helping, or?
I don't know, hashtags are interesting. So I think that they do help when you're a new account. So on my personal account, I think I have like 1,500 followers or something. And, if I don't hashtag, or if I'm, shadow banned by Instagram, I notice that my likes significantly go down. And then when I do hashtag, it really pushes, your style into like a grouping, and you can get a following from people that follow that hashtag and like your work, if your work is consistent. That's another topic for another day. I think is like your Instagram should more or less be, relatively consistent if it's your photography style or if it's like some sort of theme. But then a strategy, I don't know. I think like I look for hashtags that have, a high number of followings, but then also I also look for other accounts that also use similar hashtags. And then I think it's also important to like, if that hashtag has an account that features you, making sure that that account is on brand from what your account has to offer.
Cool. And also kind of very related with like the keeping consistency. How often are you posting based on pictures you got with your like professional camera versus like your iPhone or whatever kind of camera you have in your pocket all the time?
Yeah. So for my Instagram account lately, if you scroll like way down, like way down, since I've had Instagram since 2011, you'll see some like interesting posts, which more or less were any phone that I had, one of my 6. So mostly my iPhone. But then in the recent, in the first couple months of remote year, it was all of my like cell phone, my Android, and then now all the photos are of my Sony camera. But you can really have great photos with an iPhone, with an Android, with any phone. My old coworker Cubby Graham has like 750,000 Instagram followers, and he does exclusively iPhone. So he tags himself as like I think like a mobile urban explorer. I don't know, something like that. But it's very possible to really take great photos with your iPhone. I don't think like a high quality, full frame camera is really necessary for Instagram, but it helps you get some. Honestly, I think it makes more joy in the process, because Instagram is kind of like a portfolio. So if you have like a fun experience taking the picture, it makes the posting experience more of like you're sharing something that you've created instead of something that you snapped. But I think either way works.
Awesome. Just to switch gears a bit, and this question actually came in from 2 people. So that's what we'll go with next. Is how like back to sort of when you were talking about like how you manage your time and how you like stay kind of working all the time, but don't really use any of those apps or whatever. You just have a to-do list. How do you accurately bill your clients if you're not really like tracking your time like specific to the minute, or is that even like how you're getting paid? Like, does that even?
Right. So that's a really good question. And I was really quick to set up retainer rates on things that I work on because I think tracking your time by the hour, I think like slightly devalues the work that you do. Because, if you're a really good developer and you can make a website in a day, but that's like a $3,000 value to a client, but your day rate is significantly lower than that, then you've kind of like shot yourself in the foot with the amount of value you can provide. So, even when that like retainer setup wasn't necessarily, like set up, I would often quote based on the project rate. So you would get kind of the scope of work, and then you would like figure out how much time you think it would take you, and then kind of compare that with how much value you think you can provide. And then after those two formulas were kind of created, then you have your rate that you can kind of use for your invoices. But I pretty strongly dislike hourly billing. I try not to do it as much as possible.
And like, so you basically just go on like industry sort of standards to set your own rate, or do you like actually go above it because you think you deserve that and you're better than industry standard, or because there's a lot of questions from different people just kind of around that, like how do you place value on your own self to somebody you're working for?
Yeah, so rates and personal value, or like how much you think that you could charge, is something I also really struggled with before. And you could go off of a ton of different numbers. You can look on some blog articles. You can do something, but I think like invoicing somebody and just like trying it. So sending out your rate and seeing how it's received. So like every field is different. So I don't think I'll say numbers, but also feel free to message me if you want to like have any other discussions on what rates you think you should be. But basically use maybe a salary that you really would respect for your rate, and then take the yearly, then divide it by 12 for the monthly, then like kind of get it down to the hour to figure out what you think your ballpark would be, and then use that as sort of like a benchmark for what that hourly rate should be, and then kind of like have that as a number that you can divide by the estimated hours for the scope of work that you're doing. So if you're writing a blog article or doing like a small bug fix for something for like a website, like kind of use that benchmark of what you think your hourly should be. And then if it's really well received by a client, maybe add 20% and see how the next one will take it. And then maybe add 25 more percent, see how they'll take it. If they counter you, they counter you. They're interested in working with you. So I don't think they would necessarily like, just like stop working with you.
Like cut off.
Right. So yeah.
Cool. Well, in the interest of keeping this to around half an hour, I think we'll just do one last question from Jessica. She's asking, for your web development work, which I think is kind of the main piece of your pie, do you recommend starting your own business and then doing your work through this like sort of business that you've created, or do you find that necessary or not necessary?
Yeah, it depends on how much work you're actually getting. So for 2016, I wasn't bringing in that much. So I had 2 active projects, but they were like kind of really, really, really long projects, and like a lot of money wasn't really coming in from them in 2016. So it's not really worth. Well, it's hard. So an LLC is always good because you protect yourself. So I don't want to not recommend having an LLC, but if you're doing a little bit of work on the side, it's not as necessary. But once you start bringing in more and more work, and you want to actually have like a brand behind the thing you're standing behind, and if you want to potentially even hire in more clients, basically if you're adding more complexity to what you're doing, then creating the LLC, for me, I'm actually like creating an S corp pass through. So I take a small salary, and then the rest is the distribution. Like all those things I think can kind of pile on after, but it's more important to have the clients, have them paying you, have them respect your work. And then if that's going well, like taking it up to the next level, because plenty of people do sole proprietorships and have that in their tax portfolio or whatever, but it's not always necessary. There's always a case for every situation.
Cool. All right, and apologies to any questions we didn't get to. This is just, I guess, very interesting to the largest audience we've ever had for a knowledge drop. So thanks to everybody who did join this morning, and hopefully you guys learned something. And I don't know, are people okay to reach out to you on Slack if they have questions that we didn't get to? Or?
Absolutely. So yeah, everybody interested in learning more can feel free to reach out on Slack. We can even schedule like a 15-minute talk. I'm totally cool with that. You can also, reach out to me on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. I'm all over the internet. So feel free to chat whichever way you feel best.
And follow Halfassed Travel. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, follow Halfassed Travel. That's great.
Cool. Well, I'll sign off for now. And this video will be up on the Knowledge Drop channel if you guys want to watch it again or share it with anybody else that you think might find value in it. And thanks again for joining us this morning. Thanks, Dan. That was awesome, man. Have a great Wednesday, everybody.